Hey guys, it's Misty. Let's go ahead and jump right into this card that I made for this week's Simon Says Stamp Wednesday challenge. It's kind of a long one. Our challenge this week is Midsummer Blues, and we are showcasing products from Memory Box. And I made this really fun underwater. It turned out to be a layered shaker card, so I'm starting out on some pre-cut Bristol Smooth cardstock. I cut it down to 4 inches by 5 1/4. And I'm going to cut out, there's 3 layers to this. There's 3 different collages, all by Memory Box. One is called, let's see, it's Seaweed Collage, Coral Collage, and then Underwater Collage. And they all 3 go together in a really cool way. Like they're not lined up exactly the same as another one, but they all fit together. So when you see them layered, you see they all kind of go together. So I was just kind of lining up the die roughly in the same area as the last one I cut, just so they would be, the openings would be in the same spot. Then I'm going to go ahead, and then you have your background piece. So I have my 3 layers, and then I have a background. So I'm going to go ahead and color the background first, and I'm using Distress Oxide inks. I'm going to color, I'm starting out here with the chipped sapphire, and then I'm going to quickly switch it over to start off with my lightest color. But what I'm doing here is I'm lining up the background with the next layer, and I'm scooting it down just a little bit, and then I'm going to make pencil marks so I know where the color is going to start coming through. I'm going to erase those pencil marks so I can barely see them. And then that way I know how much space I have to color before you'll even be able to see the color coming through the opening there. So I started out with the darkest color, and then I don't know, I just realized I like starting with the lightest color first for some reason. I think it's because then I can tell by the time I get down to the darkest color whether I should have a heavy hand or a light hand. So if I start too heavy with the darkest color, then I'm just stuck going dark with the other lighter color. So I don't know. I just always like to start with the lightest color first. So I just did the same thing with the pencil marks. I lined it up and scooted it down just a little bit, like just a centimeter down, and then made my pencil marks. That way there's no chance of it showing through the window, and it's still pretty, roughly close to where the color is going to be showing through. It's not quite shining, but all right. And then I did peacock feathers in the center, and then I'm going to blend that chipped sapphire and the peacock feathers together. And see, I didn't have very much chipped sapphire there at all, and it easily blends with the peacock feathers. It blended really nicely. So for this is the seaweed collage layer. I'm just going to take a couple colors, and I'm going to go over it with my finger dauber here and just color where the seaweed is. I don't want to get it on my background. And I thought about doing the backgrounds in different colors, but I just didn't want it to look too choppy. I don't know what the word I'm looking for. I just didn't want it to not look like it meshed together like it should. I know there's a better word for that, but I don't know what it is at this moment. So I'm going to end up doing all the backgrounds the same colors. So I use this Twisted Citron and Mowed Lawn for the seaweed, and then I'm going to use the carved pumpkin and a little bit of spiced. No carved pumpkin. It was spiced marmalade and dried marigold. And the dried marigold was a little too light. I really wanted that orange to pop against the blue background. So I'm gonna just put the dried marigold around the edges, and then the majority of the coral is going to be the brighter spiced marmalade. So once I get those colors on, I'm going to mask them off. Now this is this is a lazy way to mask it off. I just used that Post-it tape that I was using to keep my fingerprints off my background. I just ripped that up and covered the seaweed. And then I'm going to do the exact same colors. So I'm going to cut out all this coloring since I've already done it. Now this worked pretty well. There was a couple areas that I could have gotten a little bit closer, but I'm just gonna go back over it really quick and cover those areas up with the Twisted Citron. The Twisted Citron looks really good with the mowed lawn. Those colors look really well together. And I wanted to just have two colors to give it, you know, a little bit, the kind of like it has dimension, or like it has shadow areas. And then for the coral one, I had a bright idea to cut it out of masking paper. So I just cut the bottom portion of the die because all I needed was the coral. So I just took a piece of scrap masking paper and cut the bottom of the die to get these little pieces here. And this worked much better than the Post-it tape. And I didn't have to worry about, you know, not covering an area or missing an area. So I'm going to do the same thing, same colors. I'll spare you from having to watch me do that again. But then I'm going to take off my masking tape here, and look how pretty this coral looks on this blue background. I love it. I love the orange with the blues. And I decided I wanted to add a little something extra to my background. So I'm going to use this stencil from Honeybee Stamps. It's part of the Ocean Scene Builder stencils. So there's 4 stencils in it, which are all really cool. You can make a really cool underwater scene with these stencils. But I'm going to use some white shimmer ink here. And it's just a really pretty pearl color. So when you turn it just right in the light, you see this really pretty pearly shimmer in the very background. They're all backgrounds, I guess, but this is the one that's you're going to see through the openings. And of course I got to sprinkle on some water to activate the oxidation here. Just kidding. I don't know if that's what it's really doing, but you know what it does. Just makes it look like bubbles in the water. It's really cool. A lot of times when I do distress Oxide inks, I don't splatter water, and I need to do that more often because I don't know, I love how it makes it look. I decided to add it to a piece of fog cardstock, and then I tossed up the idea of whether my top layer should be this light blue color. This is, what color is this cardstock? This is Sea Glass by Simon Says Stamp, and I thought about that color because the challenge is Midsummer Blues, and, you know, just add a little bit more blue to it. But at the end, I just thought the white stood out more, so I'm going to stick with the white because I still have plenty of blue in the background. And here's where I decided I may turn this into a shaker card, so I decided to pop up 2 of the layers on craft foam. I'm not going to do it on all 3 layers because I think it would make the card too thick. But I just did it on 2 layers, which worked out perfectly. Now I'm cutting away the coral portion of the craft foam here because I thought I was going to put a layer of acetate right up behind the coral. So I thought there'd be a piece of acetate in between the coral background and the foam. But I ended up not putting a piece in there because I put it on the top layer. The top, it's right beneath the top layer of the card. I hope this makes sense. I know I know it's hard to see the acetate, and it's, you know, sometimes hard to explain what I'm trying to say here, but it turned out fine just because it's inside the window. So now I'm cutting away on the seaweed here because there is going to be a sheet of acetate right behind that. So it doesn't need any support. And, you know, it's a little more connected than the coral is. The coral's just kind of hanging all out there, whereas the seaweed, it attaches at the top and the bottom. So I probably wouldn't have needed that craft foam behind there anyway. So I made sure to do glue around the opening and around the outside, since I've pretty much decided I'm going to do a shaker card at this point. I'm just trying to make sure the craft foam is all going to be hidden behind the window. sometimes when I run it through my die cutting machine, it flattens it, and so I just don't like being able to look in the window and seeing the white, so I have to make sure it's perfectly lined up. That's why I like to use dies where I can cut a bigger size so you can't see it at all, but didn't have that option on this one. So this is the reason I had the 2 sheets of acetate instead of just one on the front, because I wanted my fish to stand up off the background, and I thought it would make it look more like they were, you know, kind of floating, and like you'd see them in the water. But you can't even tell I'm putting them on acetate here. It just looks like I'm putting them right on the background, but I'm not. I'm putting them on that first sheet of acetate there. So this is the craft foam for the second layer, and there's no acetate behind this one. Now see, if this was going to be the front of the card, I would have wanted that coral to have some support just because it was going to be open. You know, it could get caught on something or somebody could accidentally pull it forward, and it'd be good to have it glued to something, but I knew it was going to be inside the window. Now for the second piece of acetate, I'm using heat resistant acetate. I didn't use that on the first layer because I wasn't going to do any heat embossing, but I knew I was going to heat emboss, so I'm using the heat resistant acetate for this part. And if you're going to do heat embossing, you should clean the acetate really well with just water and a cloth, and then definitely use the anti-static powder. Anti-static powder is very important if you're heat embossing on acetate. Trust me, it makes a huge mess if you don't use it. Then I had way too much anti-static powder on there, so I'm just gonna shake it over my garbage really quick. Now don't get confused, I'm putting a sheet of acetate on the background here, but only because I wanted a flat surface to stamp it on, but it's actually going to be the top piece of acetate. I hope that makes sense. But I needed to obviously have a flat surface, but I wanted to see where the fish were, and so I could line up those bubbles right where I wanted them. This bubble stamp is from the Stamping Bella stamp set called Tiny Towny Mermaid Set. And I made a really cute mermaid card using that stamp set. I'll put a link in the top right if you want to check out that card. Turned out really cute. So now I'm just putting on the white embossing powder. And you definitely don't want to hold your heat gun on the acetate very long. See there, I still had a few little stragglers of embossing powder, but not much at all. So you see I'm putting the heat on, taking it off, and putting it back on. I'm letting it cool down in between hitting it again so it won't warp the acetate. And make sure you let it cool before you wipe it, because I've also done that before too, where it wasn't cool yet and I tried to wipe off that anti-static powder and I smeared the embossing powder. See, all these mistakes you learn as you go, and hopefully you don't make the same mistake twice. Unless you have a horrible memory like me and you keep making the same mistakes over and over. Speaking of mistakes, that's actually the second time I heat embossed the bubbles, because the first time I wasn't paying attention and I used the other acetate that's not heat resistant, and it warped, my heat gun warped the acetate pretty bad, so I had to redo it. Yeah, my husband used to say I have the memory of a goldfish, and I want to be offended by that, but he's kind of right. I have a horrible memory. I keep meaning to find out if dementia is hereditary, because that's my grandma had it. I just keep forgetting to, there we go, I keep forgetting to look it up. Yeah, I'll make a note of it. All right, so I picked out a bunch of different sequins here. I just wanted a little bit of a couple different sequins, and this one here I love. This is my favorite one. And some of these sequins aren't available anymore, but I linked some that are similar to the ones that I used. So I'm just going to sprinkle a little bit of this and a little bit of that in here. Got some of these flat sequins that I I love using. They don't get stuck behind the acetate. And this is one of the few times that my background fits exactly the same size as the front part here where the sequins are. So I can put the shaker bits in the window and then put the back on. So normally I have to fit them all on the background. I try to get them all in the center and then put the top on because I don't trust myself blindly lining things up like that. But it's the same exact size, so it works for this. And just to make sure, I'm using my score buddy here to make sure I line it up just right. Look at all that shiny goodness in there. Now see, I didn't think about this, but I could have put some sequins on the other side of that back piece of acetate. But I just didn't even think of that. So this is the top layer, and this is where that second piece of acetate's going to be. So 2 sheets of acetate and 2 layers of craft foam. So I'm just going to quickly let that glue dry and then attach this to my fog cardstock. Now see, I wish I would have, I might have said this in the beginning, but I wish I would have trimmed the sides of the shaker part down a little bit so more of the fog cardstock would have shown, but it's too late for that at this point. If I would have thought about it, I would have probably cut it down to 3 3/4 by 5 inches. That way you could see a little bit more of the fog cardstock. All right, now I'm just going to attach my final layer here. So this is no craft foam, just acetate. And I'm still using my Gina K Connect glue to attach this. And then once I get this on, I think, look how cool it looks. Doesn't that look cool? So you have a little bit of layer in there, or a little bit of dimension in there with the craft foam, and you got the sequins and the bubbles. I love it. So I'm going to end up swapping out this sentiment. The sentiment I end up using is by, it's on the Keep On Swimming stamp set by Lawn Fawn, which is not what you see here, but I couldn't decide. I liked the sentiment that I put on there, the thanks for being fantastic, but it was 2 different words, so I was going to put the thanks for being at the top just on the background on the white, and then the fantastic down on the bottom using black ink. But I really liked the black, the white on black. I just liked it, stood out more. It had, had more contrast, so I ended up just putting the 2 words together and making one long sentiment. Next, I'm just going to attach these iridescent bubbles by Studio Katia onto my acetate, and then glue everything to a top folding card base. And see, it's not too thick. You got a little bit of dimension. You got 2 layers of dimension, so it's not too hefty. It'll still fit in an envelope, which I was happy about. I love how this turned out. Got a little bit of dimension, some sequins, some floating fish, and then some iridescent bubbles on the outside. Got a little bit of everything here. Then I just added a couple to the card front for a little embellishment, and that is pretty much it. So I'm going to wrap this up. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it. If you have any questions, you can always leave me a comment down below. If you want more info on this card, or want to know how to join us for the Simon Says Stamp Wednesday challenge, you can head over to my blog. There will be a link in the video description below. All the supplies I use are listed and linked down below as well. Let's see, what else do I usually tell you? Click on the like button if you liked it. Subscribe if you want to see more, and I will see you next week. Thanks a lot. Bye.